right back. I had a little bit of technical difficulties there. Um, uh, Facebook, or excuse me, yeah, YouTube wanted to go offline on me.
Cry to leave the table during homework. An alternative behavior could be asking for a break. So, Mom, can I have a break? Is more acceptable than crying. So we teach them to use asking for a break, which serves the same function of escape from the homework. That's about it. Let's do a quick recap, and I'm going to read down.
How do you know for sure, though, that no matter what, you're going to make it the homework? Maybe they were uncomfortable because they were sitting. So it wasn't, in fact, the homework at all. It was the fact that they were uncomfortable. Maybe they needed to get up and move around, and it was a regulatory thing. Maybe, so it wasn't. Now, asking to get up and go is a great thing. But are you going to allow that, or just consider that to be a behavior and not allow it because it's a behavior and you're not going to allow behaviors? You people need to chill.
Down here from time to time to check out my notes, make sure I don't miss anything. So, preference assessments are done to find possible reinforcers. They're done in 3 ways: by asking, free operant, and trial-based. Asking, you just ask or do a survey. Free operant, they are free to explore. Trial-based, you present the items, either single, paired, or multiple, which is 3 or more, and multiple can be with or without replacement. These preferred items are only considered reinforcers after they are shown to increase the likelihood of that behavior occurring in the future. As an RBT, it is not your job to choose the assessment, but you play a crucial role in assisting with assessments since the learner probably likes you best. And know that every behavior has a function, and the way you find that function is with a functional behavior assessment. And the way you tease it out is in 3 different ways. You can do an indirect assessment, which is interviewing or giving questionnaires to individuals familiar with the learner. Direct or descriptive assessment, where you're observing behavior in the natural environment and not manipulating. This includes ABC data, antecedent behavior consequence data, and functional/experimental analysis, where you're manipulating the environment.
Yes, you're manipulating. You're definitely manipulating. You got that word exactly right. You're definitely being very manipulative.
By arranging antecedents and consequences to determine the function. Alright, you've reached the end of the video. Congratulations! Here's some reinforcement to reward you for your hard work. Cute enough? I might change it up from video to video. But yeah, keep going. You're almost there. You're done with section B. Next section is going to be a little bit longer, so I'm going to split it into 2 videos, part 1 and part 2. It's a long one, but it's pretty important. It's the bulk of the exam, so be prepared for that. Alright, so thank you for joining. Subscribe if you haven't done. Hello, and skill acquisition plan. So the first thing you want to do with a skill acquisition plan is...
Okay, once again, we've never talked about the autistic kid. We have not mentioned the autistic kid. We have not mentioned anything about that they have neurosensitivities that first and foremost need to be addressed before we think about doing anything. But no, automatically he's writing off our sensitivities, our neurological issues to behaviors. And now and this is not about the autistic kid, it's about the adult here, the RBT, manipulating the child and how to manipulate the child properly. That's what this is about. Not helping the autistic child.
Choose a skill to target. The important thing is that this skill must be socially significant. What does that mean? It means that it helps the individual become more independent, it's age appropriate, and it must be socially relevant to increase...
And what is socially relevant?
...their quality of life in a daily basis.
Which is all subjective. Okay, go on.
Next thing is that you have to describe the skill and also describe what mastery or proficiency of the skill looks like. Then you have to choose the data.
So, but the thing is as a neurotypical RBT, you're not going to necessarily know that. So they're just what he needs to say is just pull shit out of your ass, pull shit out of your ass, and write it down.
Data collection procedures. This includes what materials will be used, what type of prompting will be used. Prompting is basically like hints that you'll give, how you will reinforce, and what the plan is for maintenance after that skill has been mastered. After you've completed drafting the plan, the next step is to take baseline data. Baseline data is basically any data taken before an intervention occurs. And this is to know what the level of the child is before you even start the plan.
So this is where they're going to make the child look really, really, really debilitated on paper. And then they are going to do some stuff and they are going to change the behavior. But then they're going to glorify how they changed the behavior in the end.
During collection of baseline data, it's important not to reinforce or try to punish any of the behaviors. You're not manipulating, you're just seeing where they are. Okay, C2. Prepare for the session as required.
Did you get that? You weren't manipulating, you're just seeing where they are. For now. For now. And he'll get into that.
By the skill acquisition
he'll get
plan.
Into where you are manipulating behaviors, and then I'll bring that up. But here he said you are not. I just wanted to make
so we kind of talked about this in a previous video. What do you need to be prepared? Do you remember? So before the session, you have to look over the data sheets to see what you are targeting this session. And you choose the skills that you will focus on. So if you have some behaviors that are risky or dangerous, those will take priority. Also, be familiar with any procedures you have to implement and have all your materials ready. So this includes...
See, notice how procedural, this is all so procedural, but he's never mentioned an autistic child yet. I'm in the third video and he's not mentioned an autistic child yet, except for how you're going to manipulate them.
Having all your devices charged, your flashcards ready, your reinforcers in hand, and other devices. One key thing to remember about behavior analysis is that it is data driven.
Those reinforcers were the child's favorite toys, by the way, that he said to have in hand. The child's favorite toys because he took them away from the child to get behaviors out of him.
Which means that if the skill acquisition plan is not working, you must modify it. It is never set in stone. C3. Use contingencies of reinforcement. So if you haven't watched it already, highly recommend you watch the reinforcement / punishment video I made. I'll link it up here and in the description. It goes into depth into what you should know about
reinforcement / punishment video I made. Wow. He made a punishment video for kids.
Reinforcement, and this is one of the key concepts you have to understand in ABA. But just really quickly, reinforcement is a stimulus that is presented after a behavior occurs, which makes the behavior more likely to occur in the future. So let me ask you a question. If you give a child ice cream after he cleans his room, is the ice cream considered a reinforcer? The answer is we don't know, because a reinforcer is only a reinforcer after it's proven to increase the chances of that behavior occurring in the future. So at that point, we don't know if it's a reinforcer. If the child starts cleaning his room more often after getting ice cream, then it is a reinforcer. If instead the child is...
And then one day you decide to take away the reinforcers.
less likely to clean his room after getting ice cream, it's actually a punisher and not a reinforcer. Same stimulus, different effects. Another important thing when using reinforcement...
Calling ice cream a punishment, I think, is a stretch. It's not a punisher. It's just no, dude. No, you're wrong. You're wrong.
Is
You're wrong.
the immediacy, or how long after the behavior occurs you present the reinforcer. This is important because the effectiveness of a reinforcer drops dramatically the longer you wait to give it. So you're supposed to give it immediately after the behavior occurs.
Yeah, just like you do with dogs. Right? Just like you do with dog training.
Now let's talk about conditioned versus unconditioned reinforcement. Conditioning or conditioned simply means learned. So unconditioned reinforcement, also known as primary reinforcement, does not have to be learned. It's kind of primal, those inherent forms of reinforcement. So this could be like food, water, or sex. Conditioned reinforcement, also known as secondary reinforcement, is something that starts as a neutral stimulus that has no effect, and it's paired with an established reinforcer, and then it becomes a reinforcer itself. So the example that's always used is the bell with Pavlov's dog. A bell doesn't do anything to a dog, but when you pair a bell with something like food, now the bell can elicit a response like salivation. Next, we're going to talk about schedules of reinforcement. I highly recommend, if you want.
The very basis of behavioral science and brainwashing is what he just quoted there. The very basis of brainwashing and behavioral science.
An in-depth explanation of the schedules of reinforcement, that you watch my other video I made on it. I'm not going to go over all that, or else this video would be over 30 minutes long. But in that video I talk about what to look for in graphs and I give examples of each one. But the key thing you have to remember is that there's two types of schedules of reinforcement. There's continuous and intermittent. Continuous reinforcement, or CR, is when you reinforce after every single instance of a behavior. Okay? So they engage in the behavior, boom, reinforcement. Another behavior, boom, reinforcement. Continuous reinforcement. CR. But in real life, you don't get reinforced after every single instance of a behavior. You get reinforced from time to time. And that's why we use intermittent reinforcement. So for intermittent reinforcement, there's 4 types: fixed ratio, variable ratio, fixed interval, and variable interval. And those can also be abbreviated into FR, VR, FI, and VI. So let's break it down. Fixed means fixed, or not changing. Variable means it changes from time to time. Ratio means you need a certain amount of responses to get a reinforcer, and interval means a certain amount of time has to pass before that reinforcement is available again. So it kind of has to charge up. You have to wait a minute or something like that for another availability of that reinforcer. So let's start with fixed ratio, or FR.
They teach this stuff to our in the military. They teach the same kind of stuff with interrogation of prisoners, by the way.
That means you need a specific amount of responses in order to get a reinforcer. So if they put FR3, that means it's fixed ratio 3 responses. So you need to respond 3 times correctly in order to get a reinforcer. So if a button is set up to be FR3, you have to push the button 3 times for the candy to come out. Variable ratio is like fixed ratio, except it varies from time to time. So it's not always going to be 3. So let's implement discrete trial training procedures. So discrete trial training, also known as discrete trial teaching, or DTT, is a subset of ABA therapy which breaks down skills into smaller or discrete steps, and it's usually done at a table. This is what most people imagine when you tell them that you're about to do an ABA session. It became popular after a 1987 Lovas paper published that showed that DTT is very effective for kids with autism. So in DTT, you have trials. And the trials are like this. You present the discriminative stimulus, or SD, and that's usually just an instruction.
The thing is even autistic children can learn. And autistic children, this shit may not work at all. But autistic children are still smart enough. A lot of times, it's obvious that they're what behaviors they want. They're trying to make it very obvious. So it's not difficult for an autistic child to pick up on that and basically just do it to shut these guys up. It doesn't mean they're helping them or training them. The kids may be doing it because they know that that's what they're supposed to do. They have not changed their behaviors at all. They're just putting on a show for these wing nuts here.
Okay. Then they either do the correct response and you reinforce, or they have an incorrect response and then you prompt the correct response. And that's basically it in a nutshell. And then you just go on to the next trial. So let's talk about some techniques used in DTT. So the first thing you should know is mass trial. Mass trial is when you present the same instruction, or SD, over and over again. This should be reserved for people who are very new to ABA or for learners that need the extra help, and it should only be used for skills that will increase their independence, like language or self-help skills. You could have a mass trial without distractors, like for example, you can say, touch car, and only have a flashcard of one car on the table and nothing else on the table. That would be a mass trial without distractor. And when people refer to something as a mass trial, they're usually referring to it without distractors.
I'd like to sit you down on a table. Touch car. Touch car.
However, mass trials could also be with distractors. And in that case, you refer to it as a distractor trial. So a distractor trial presents the same SD, or instruction, over and over, like touch car, but there's other things in the array on the table that serve as distractors that the child or learner does not know yet. So if you say touch car, you'd have the car, which you're working on, and then you have a helicopter and an airplane, which they've never seen in their lives, also on the table. Mixed trials are the opposite of mass trials. It's when you switch up the SD or instruction every single time. This is good so that the child can learn to discriminate between the different SDs or instructions. So an
example is, the kids have not been mentioned here once. The well-being of the child has not been ever addressed at all in any way, shape, or form.
An example of this is random rotation. Random rotation is when you have something you're working on, but also other objects on the table that they have already mastered. So in this example, you're working on touch car, but they already know plane and helicopter. So a session with random rotation could be like touch car, point to plane, cover helicopter, and that is random rotation. Once a learner masters a skill, it is important that they maintain the ability to engage in that skill. So you have to test it out from time to time after they've already mastered it. This is called maintenance. And one way to do maintenance is to throw in that flashcard or whatever they learned into random rotation. Some skills can also be generalized, and this is called generalization. That's basically that they're using that skill and applying it to different settings, times, or with different people. So for example, if you teach a child to draw with a crayon, they could generalize that skill in order to hold a pencil.
So, do you notice how this is all procedural and how to manipulate a child? This is not about the child's well being.
For writing. C5. Implement naturalistic teaching procedures. So, like I said earlier, not all ABA is done at the table, like with discrete trial training. If you have quality therapy, you should be doing it in a natural environment. So that's called naturalistic teaching, or natural environment training, or NET, which is basically when you take this.
And NET is never actually natural environment training. Listen, if it was natural environment training, then you would just, I don't know, what do you need to do today? Go to the store. Then that's your natural environment. I mean, are you, um, were you planning on going swimming that day? That's your natural environment. Whatever is actually naturally going on in that person's life at any given time. But what they do is they set up a fake natural environment and call that natural environment training, and it's not. It's contrived.
Skills you learned at the table and try to use them out there in the real world. And this is crucial to have in a quality therapy session, because what's the point of teaching a child to label dog on a flashcard if they can't identify a dog at the park? It also provides spontaneous opportunities for learning. So if you see...
And I have never ever seen NET training being applied outside of the lab. Never. Not once. Now, maybe it's done. Don't get me wrong. But I've never seen any representation of it.
A squirrel, you could practice saying squirrel, or labeling a squirrel, or asking what a squirrel eats. So you have spontaneous opportunities for learning. So as a behavioral therapist, you might be required to go to the grocery store with a child, or the mall, or the park, or even school. Wherever the problem behaviors or skill acquisition skills are needed, that's where you'll go. And it's really fun, because there's no better feeling in the world than hanging out with the kiddos on a trampoline and jumping around and knowing that they are developing new skills that will help them progress. All you have to know for this section is that the skills learned in discrete trial training are to be generalized during natural environment training, and that in naturalistic teaching there are spontaneous opportunities for learning. That's all you need to know. C6. Implement task analyzed chaining procedures. Now, I know I've been plugging a bunch of videos and I didn't want this video to get too long, but there's another video here that describes everything you need to know about chaining, but I'm just going to give you the quick rundown. So, chaining is for teaching very complex tasks with many steps. So the first thing you need to do is a task analysis. And what that is that you get this complex task and split it up into very manageable...
It's all about the therapist. There's not been one mention yet of an autistic child, and I've watched 4 videos now.
Small steps or chunks. After you're done with the task analysis, then you have to choose one of 3 ways to do chaining. The first one is forward chaining, the second one is backwards chaining, and the third one is total task chaining. Forward, you go in order. So first you teach the first step, then the second step, then the third step, all the way to the last step. So, for example, in washing hands, first you would teach turning on the faucet. Then you would teach getting soap. And you go on from there, step by step, from the beginning to the end. Backwards chaining is that you start teaching from the last step and then go to the first step. So, it would be first teaching how to wipe your hands dry with a towel. Then the next step you choose is turning off the faucet, because it's the second to last. And you keep going backwards until you reach the first step. And total task chaining is when you teach the whole task at once and you just prompt when they have difficulty with one of the steps. And that's it. You reached the end of the video. Here's your reward. Reinforcing enough? Alright. So that's it for this part. Hello and welcome.
How many of these videos do you have? Okay, I'm over halfway through.
To ABA Made Easy. I'm Mauricio, and today we'll be going over the second part of C, skill acquisition. So we're going to use a token board today. What do you want to work for? Do you want to work for a magic trick? Candy?
This is basic behavioral science. Once again, this is the same basics is where we get ABA from. It all comes from brainwashing techniques, essentially, that was developed pre-40s.
Or $1 million? Alright, I hear you loud and clear. You want a
I mean, the Inquisition used torture and mind control, and this is what's going on. This is a type of mind control. This is a type of brainwashing. This is manipulative behaviors. This is how they're manipulating a child. And once again, no, there will never, ever, ever be any mention of helping the child or the child's well-being. Let's watch.
magic trick. So we're gonna work for a magic trick. So if you get 6 tokens, I'll show you a magic trick at the end. If you're finding this videos useful, go ahead and hit like below, but let's get right into it. C7, implement discrimination training. Now, while I'm a big proponent of educating people on discrimination, this refers to another type of discrimination. This type of discrimination is knowing how to behave depending on what stimuli are presented. This is done by reinforcing behavior in the presence of one stimulus and not another stimulus.
This is child training 101.
Think of this like a traffic light.
Think of this like a dog.
When you have a traffic light that's
When you have a kid and you treat them like a dog, this is how you treat them.
says green, it means go. When it's red, it means stop, assuming you don't live in Florida. This is because green has been reinforced by having less chance of getting involved in a collision or receiving a ticket. But discrimination can be much more basic, as in naming animals and differentiating the animals, or more complex, like learning how to see a subtle change in a brain scan and knowing how to intervene. When doing ABA therapy, discrimination training should be done by only changing one characteristic. If you're teaching letters, they should all be the same size and the same color, so that you're not confusing colors and shapes with letters. So if they're all black 1-inch characters, the person will know that the thing you're trying to differentiate is the letter. By the same token, if you're teaching colors, all the colors should be the same shape. You shouldn't have a red triangle and a blue square when teaching colors, or that can get confusing. So you want all the shapes to be the same, but you want the colors to be different. One note on discriminative stimulus, which is hard to say.
Huge on getting colors for kids. I mean, I hear about that all the time. Getting colors, getting colors, getting colors. There's a lot more to the world than figuring out what color stuff is. I'm telling you. And frankly, you don't have to know.
Or SD, is that in behavior analysis, all the stimuli have a letter S, and then they put a little prefix on top, D. So you know the stimulus is a discriminative stimulus. So a discriminative stimulus is the type of stimulus that will give you reinforcement. In contrast, you have an S delta, they use the Greek letters here, that just means that an S delta does not reinforce. So why do behavior analysts use this type of terminology? Because they like making your life difficult and they like to sound smart and scientific. That's probably why. So if you have 4 cards out and the cards say 1, 2, 3, 4, and you say point to number 1, the card that's marked with the number 1 in the presence of the instruction of point to number 1, that's the SD, which means that only touching the card in the presence of that instruction will give reinforcement. All the other cards in the presence of that instruction are S delta, which means that if they touch it, they will not get reinforcement. C8, Implement stimulus control transfer procedures. After you've successfully completed discrimination training, a behavior should occur more under one stimulus than another stimulus. This is called stimulus
When are we taking the child's welfare into consideration here?
control. Now, when you're first teaching a behavior, you might want
Teaching a behavior.
to provide a few
I'm
hints,
gonna have nightmares about behaviors.
also known as prompts. So if you say, point to ball, a prompt might be gesturing towards the ball, or maybe modeling how to point to the ball. Those are both types of prompts. But see, the problem is that the stimulus control is a little bit with the prompt and not just the instruction. So in order to make it fully under the stimulus control of the instruction rather than the gesture or pointing, you have to do a fading procedure. And that brings us to C9. C9. Implement prompt and prompt fading procedures. So the point of prompt fading is to transfer stimulus control from a prompted instruction or SD to an SD that the instructor is giving to an SD that they would find in their natural environment. So not all prompting is created equal. Some prompting is more intrusive than others. The goal is to use the least intrusive prompt possible while still teaching the task, and then slowly get it less and less intrusive until you don't need a prompt anymore. This is called fading. So here's a list of prompts from most intrusive to least intrusive. And we'll use the example, touch the one that has wheels, as an example. So if you're using a physical prompt, which there's two types, you're gonna actually hold their hand or finger and make them touch the one that has wheels. So let's say a car is on the table. So you use a full physical.
You do not touch autistic people. You keep your hands away from autistic people, dude.
Prompt, and you make them touch
What
it.
is it with ABA therapists' fixation on touching children?
Okay.
Would you like it if I forced you to do things? No. You wouldn't at all. But you think it's perfectly okay because that kid's just autistic.
Now there's two types of physical prompts. There's a full physical prompt where your whole hand is on their hand to make them touch the car. Then there's a partial physical prompt where you leave them there halfway, or you're holding them in the elbow but not like making the whole gesture for them. You're just kind of helping them physically but not doing the whole work for them. So you have full physical, then you have partial physical, then you have model, which is you model how you're supposed to do the correct response. So you say, touch the one that has wheels, and then you show them how to touch the one that has wheels, and then they do it. So that's less intrusive than a physical prompt because you're not actually holding their hand, but it's still kind of intrusive because you're giving them the whole solution. You're showing them exactly how to do it.
No, it's intrusive because you're touching them. It's not intrusive because you're showing them how to do it. It's intrusive because you are physically touching them. Stop.
What's less intrusive than that? Visual. So visual, you kind of give them the hint by putting the cards closer to them, positioning it a little bit closer to them, just giving them a hint, but not actually modeling the prompt. You could also put something around the card that they're supposed to choose, just give them a hint visually or an arrow right next to it, but you're not actually holding their hand, which is physical, or modeling, which is doing the action itself. You're just highlighting where they're supposed to pick. After that, it's gestural. Gestural is that you just gesture towards it, but you don't do the whole action. So you don't actually point to the one that has wheels, you kind of gesture towards it, or you kind of just gesture. And the least intrusive prompt is verbal. Verbal is where you give a little hint. Okay, so you say, touch the one that has wheels, and then before they make a mistake,
That's not a subtle hint. That's a command. That's a demand.
say car. and then they know to pick car. Goal is, once again, use the least intrusive prompt possible, and you're gonna fade out the prompts until no prompt is needed. One final note on prompting: you want to try to avoid inadvertent prompting or accidental prompting, which is when you don't realize that you're prompting, but you're giving them a hint and they're not responding to the instruction or the SD that you want. So for example, if you're doing clicker training with a dog, which is how you train dogs using ABA therapy,
he just said that aloud. Literally, he just said that
might be saying, sit. And then every time you say sit, you bring up your hand like this. But what the dog is learning is that every time you do this, it means to sit down. They're not listening.
That's because you're treating autistic kids just like a dog.
To your instruction.
Very well
So
said, buddy.
try this with your dog. Maybe you've trained your dog to go sit, and they only know how to sit when you go like this. But if you put your hands behind your back and you say sit, they're not going to sit because you've inadvertently prompted with this. So just be careful, watch your hands, and when you're presenting the instruction to see if they truly know how to do it, don't try to help at all. Just see how they do. Whoa, we are breezing through this stuff, aren't we? All right, let's just keep going. We got it going. Momentum. C10. Implement generalization and maintenance procedures. Now, we spoke briefly about generalization in a previous video. Do you remember what it is? It's basically when you have a skill that you can use in other settings with other people or at a different time. Basically, generalization is that you could engage in a skill or behavior in different conditions than where it was initially taught. The example I gave is that if you teach a child to draw with a crayon, he'll generalize that skill to write with a pencil. So how do you generalize? The trick is to try to vary up.
The trick is to understand that you're dealing with an autistic person that is a human being rather than a number and a procedural thing that's got to be done.
The way you present.
Or a dog. We're not dogs either.
The stimuli. So you want to try it in different settings, you want to try it using different objects, and you also want to involve the parents, so the parents are also engaging in the behavior with the child instead of just you. Or you could also vary up how you present the SD. So instead of saying point to the car every single time, you say point to the car, touch the car, show me car, where's the car? And then they point to it. So you vary up the way you instruct, but it still has to have the same response. This allows the learner to see different variations. Also,
they're not even a human being, they're just a learner.
If you see the person engaging in the behavior outside of the session in their natural environment,
I can't believe they even learn. They've even figured out a way to dehumanize learning.
reinforce. All right, let's talk about maintenance now. So we talked about maintenance briefly in a previous video as well. Do you remember what maintenance is? It's where a learner continues performing behavior that was mastered previously. So we don't want someone to just master a skill and then forget about it. What's the point of that? So what we do is we check in from time to time to see if they still remember how to engage in that behavior. So let's say they've learned how to label the color green. They got it down packed. So instead of practicing it every session, which they already know the answer, you start doing it every week or every 2 weeks or every month. Now, it's not up to the RBT to choose how often to test it out. That's the BCBA or BCABA's responsibility. But just know that what you're trying to do is make sure they still got it, and so you test it from time to time. C11, implement shaping procedures. So I made a video on how to shape verbal operant behavior right over here if you're interested, but it's a super simple concept, shaping. Basically, you're just going to reinforce closer and closer approximations to the behavior that you want. That's what they mean when they say shaping the behavior. So let's use language for example. If you're trying to teach someone to say computer, and you're like, what's this? And they say, ah, they're not even close, but they tried saying a word, so you reinforce. That's the first thing. Then the next thing they say, ah, oh wow, 2 syllables, that's even closer. So now you reinforce for ah. Are you going to reinforce for ah again? Nope, because they already got closer, so they have to say ah or better now.
So therefore, we're going to demand more and more and more with less and less rewards. So we're going to teach the child not to trust us. We're going to teach us that it's never, ever, ever enough. That they can never, ever satisfy the RBT. That they're never good enough, ever.
To get reinforced. Then they say, oh wow, that's much closer. So now reinforce instead of or whatever. You get the point. The closer they're getting to the actual word, the more you're going to reinforce. But it's not just for verbal language. Let's say, again, with the example of clicker training with the dog, which by the way, what you do is you find something they like a treat, and then you use a clicker, so that way you could just click every time they have the correct behavior, and then they
Do I really have to say anything there?
know that that's a reinforcing thing, okay? So that's a conditioned reinforcer. So if you're trying to teach a dog to sit, you say sit, and then they don't sit because they don't know what's going on. If they slowly move into a sitting position, then you reinforce. And then the closer they get to a sitting position when you say sit, the more you reinforce. And you reinforce more as they're getting closer. And then eventually they'll know just to sit all the way down, and then you click and you give them their reinforcer. And that's shaping. And last section, C12, implement token economy procedures. All right, look over here, we got 5 tokens. We only need 1 more. We just finished this section, and I'll give you your final token, and then we'll choose the prize that you chose, which is the magic trick. I don't know why you didn't choose $1 million. I wanted to give it away, but hey, it was your choice. Token economies have 3 components. The first one is target behaviors. So basically the behaviors you're working on. In this case, in this video, it was staying focused during the sections. So every time you were focused during one of the sections, you got a token. Number 2, you have to be able to earn tokens or points for each behavior. And you have. I've given you a token every time you've gotten through a section. And number 3, you must have a way to redeem your tokens for a grand prize. But you don't say grand prize in behavior analysis because that's too fun. So what they call it is a backup reinforcer. So in token economies, the grand prize is a backup reinforcer. So I give you 3 options at the beginning, 3 backup reinforcers that you could choose. You chose the magic trick. The point of these token economies is to improve flow. So instead of giving you a reinforcer after every single behavior for 5 minutes or 2 minutes or whatever, I make you get a token for 6 behaviors.
I make you.
And then you get your grand prize or backup reinforcer. So it just helps improve flow. Another example that they use for token economy is making money at your job. So cash. Cash is a form of token economy. You work, you get money for that work, and then you can redeem those tokens or cash for whatever you want. And you've earned your 6th token. All right, time for you to receive your backup reinforcer. So here's your backup reinforcer. So I bought this deck of cards, and I thought, hello.
All right, I will be right back.
And welcome to ABA Made Easy. I'm Mauricio, and today we'll be covering part 5 of this RBT Clutch Review series, D, Behavior Reduction. So I just want to give a huge D1, identify essential components of a written behavior reduction plan. So as with any behavior plan, the first thing you got to do is operationally define the behavior. So do you remember what that means? It means to be as specific as possible when defining the behavior in observable terms. After you've identified the behavior, the next thing is to make a goal to how much you wish to decrease this behavior. A good way to choose the goal is to do baseline data, which is any data that's done before the treatment begins.
Yes, who's going to choose the goal? They are. The autistic person is out of the loop. They are going to be doing what they are told, and that is all. That's what this is about.
And you want to find out the function of the behavior, and you do that by looking at the antecedents, which is what happens before the behavior, and consequences, which is what happens after the behavior. But we'll talk about that more in a little bit.
Yeah, we'll do a lot of talking about that.
Then you want to find replacement or incompatible behaviors that can serve the same function as that behavior. Next, you will choose how to intervene. Are you going to modify the environment to try to prevent the behavior from occurring at all? Or
maybe
are you going to change the reinforcement that you're going to give? So what happens after the behavior? Or both?
No.
D2. Describe.
That's all your options? That's it? Really? All you want to do is
Going to give.
Listen.
So what happens after the behavior? Or both? D2. Describe common functions of behavior. So we talked about this in part B. Do you remember what the common functions of behavior are? We got
okay, the common reasons for behavior could be neurological. Number 1 should be considered to be neurological. Always neurological. Could be sensory. Could be sensory. It could be from PTSD or trauma. It could be that they're simply being manipulative and they want something and they're just throwing a temper tantrum or whatever. It could be that that they're tired. There's so many things, but being tired is not a function. Having a neurological disorder is not a function of a behavior. Having PTSD, having been sexually assaulted or something like that, is not a function of behavior. It may be a flight response, but not a function of behavior. This is not a willing thing. That it's always understood that this is a willing behavior that is done to go against the adults here.
Attention or social positive, which means that a behavior is more likely to occur in the future because it's been reinforced by attention. So someone saying, good job, or someone saying, stop that. As long as it increases the behavior, it's considered a function of the behavior that's reinforcing. Tangible, which is when you give an object that you can hold that's tangible. Then you have escape avoidance, which is what it sounds like. You're trying to escape a situation or avoid a situation altogether. And then you have automatic, and this is that innate.
I hope he gets into that escape and avoidance, because that's could be neurological too, as it is with me, particularly with us that have alexithymia or flight or perhaps PDA, pathological demand avoidant. We have a strong flight response. That's not a behavior. That's a neurological response.
Sensory stuff. So something I didn't touch on before is that you could have automatic positive or automatic negative. So automatic positive is when you're adding sensation that makes it more likely to occur in the future. So maybe hand flapping can be very sensory. It feels good. So then you're more likely to do in the future because it feels sensorily good and you're increasing the stimulus that you're receiving. Or it could be automatic negative, which is a behavior that occurs to kind of remove sensation. So if you feel pain, for instance, you'll pull your arm away to not feel the pain. And that behavior has been reinforced in the past because the painful stimulus is lessened when you pull it away. So that's automatic negative. D3. Implement interventions based on modifications of antecedents such as motivating operations and discriminative stimuli. Whoa, mouthful. Here we go. So antecedents are what are present before a behavior occurs. And you can change the environment to change the antecedents. And I made another video with a BCBA. Her name is Jeannie. Links up there or in the description if you want to learn more about antecedent manipulation or interventions. But basically, one of the examples we talked
buddy. Manipulation's a really good word there.
About is, let's say you go to the grocery store and there's a certain aisle that makes a child have a problem behavior of tantrums. An antecedent intervention can be giving an iPad to the kid right before going through the aisle because we anticipate the behavior is going to occur. So if they're distracted with the iPad, they're not going to throw a tantrum when going through the aisle. So that's an example of antecedent intervention, which is great because you're avoiding the behavior altogether. And another form of antecedent modification is changing the motivating operation, or MO. Okay, now bear with.
Or how about not taking the child down that aisle? Or how about asking the child what is going on? Why not ask them, why do you cry every time you go down this aisle? Oh, no. But he's not taking the autistic person's thoughts, feelings, or experience into account at all. He's not even going to bother to ask them. There's probably smell, by the way. Probably smell.
With me, I'm going to talk about the technicalities, then I'll give you an example, and it'll all make
In which case, the iPad is not going to cover up the smell, buddy. Just saying.
sense.
It might distract you.
So MO, or motivating operations, think of it as the motivation, okay? So you could modify the motivation to go up or down. So you have two types of MOs. You have EO and AO. EO is establishing operations, and it increases the chance of the stimulus causing a behavior to occur. And then AO is the opposite of EO. It's abolishing operations. And that's when you make the stimulus less likely to make the behavior occur. Okay? The easy way to remember that EO and AO are under the umbrella of MO is that EO and AO both start with vowels. Okay? So those are the opposites. And then they're under the umbrella of the MO. Okay, now before you click off this video, let me just explain with an example and it'll make a lot more sense. Let's say the stimulus is the sight of food, and the behavior you're trying to change is eating the food, okay? Now, if
we have a child with a food sensitivity, and now we're just going to force them to eat this food. We're not going to find out why. We don't give a crap. We're going to force them to eat this food, no matter how much it hurts them to do so.
Just ate 200 pancakes right before seeing more food. What are the chances you're going to eat that food? Not very likely, right?
Oh, so you want to starve the
abolishing operations. You made it less likely for the behavior to occur because you made the stimulus less likely to be reinforcing. You're so full, right? Establishing operations would be, let's say you didn't eat for 2 days. You're starving, right? And then you see food. You're much more likely to go after that food, okay? So the behavior of eating in the stimulus of the food, which is the same.
I really hope he's not suggesting that you withhold food from kids to make them eat the foods that you want them to eat. This is a horrible, horrible, horrible example. If that's where he is in his head right now.
Changes because you changed what happens before then. You changed the motivating operations to either be establishing, which makes it more likely to occur, or abolishing, which makes it less
He did. That's what he was suggesting. Okay.
likely to occur. Make sense? Easy concept, huh?
Wow.
D4. Implement differential reinforcement procedures. So differential reinforcement pretty much means that you're differentiating what you're reinforcing. So you're only reinforcing the desired behavior and you're not reinforcing the undesired behavior, okay? When you don't reinforce a behavior that was previously reinforced, that's called extinction, but we'll talk about that more in a little bit. So differential reinforcement. You're reinforcing only the behavior that you want and not the other ones. So there's different types of differential reinforcement, and they all have to do with what kind of replacement behavior you're using as the appropriate behavior instead of the maladaptive behavior or the inappropriate behavior. Okay? So you have 4 of them. You have DRI, DRA, DRO, and DRL. So let's say you have a kid in class who likes hitting other people as they pass by while he's on his desk, right? So an example of a DRI would be reinforcing when the kid has both hands on the table as someone else passes by. So you can't have your hands on the table and hit someone at the same time. It's impossible. You only have 2 hands and they're both on the table, so it's incompatible. That's all it means. DRA is differential reinforcement of alternative behavior. So let's say a kid wants to get the teacher's attention and he just shouts, "Miss S, I need your attention." That's not acceptable, right? We want raising your hand, okay? So if you raise your hand, you get reinforced. If he shouts, he doesn't get reinforced. Now, why isn't this incompatible? Because you could raise your hand and be like, "Hey, Miss S, over here, okay? So alternative just means that it's not incompatible. They could both happen at the same time, but it's another behavior that's acceptable rather than the other behavior. And they both serve the same function, which is the important part. They both get the attention of the teacher. Then you have DRO. DRO is basically you set a timer, okay? Let's say 3 minutes. And let's say the behavior you don't want is a kid to be hitting his head, right? So for 3 minutes, you wait. If they hit their head, they get no reinforcement, okay?
Or maybe they're just stimming, or maybe they did something innocuous.
But if they're engaging in any other behavior, if they're even like kicking other people, like throwing down the desk, whatever, you're still going to reinforce because they're not hitting their head, and that's the behavior you're targeting. Now, obviously, in this case, if they're doing all that, maybe you need to modify the plan a little bit. But basically, if they're not engaging in the behavior that you're targeting, then you reinforce. I mean, hopefully the situation is that they're not hitting their head, they're just kind of typing or doing work on the desk. Then you have DRL, the differential reinforcement of low rates. Basically, this is for those behaviors which are good sparingly. You don't want them engaging in this behavior all the time, but you don't want to eliminate that behavior. So an example is, let's say, raising your hand, right? Raising your hand is good when you want to get the teacher's attention to ask a question about the assignment or to answer a question. But if you're raising your hand every 10 seconds, getting the teacher's attention, that's very disruptive to the class. So maybe you don't want someone raising their hand that often. So in this case, it'd be great to use a DRL. What you're going to do is you're going to do, let's say, a 3-minute timer and try to reinforce if they get less than a certain threshold. So let's say they're raising their hand 30 times in 3 minutes. Maybe the goal is that they raise it 20 times in 3 minutes. So if they raise their hand 20 times or less in that 3-minute interval, then they get reinforcement. And then you slowly make it lower and lower.
For anyone Brainwashing 101.
D5. Implement extinction procedures. Now, we just talked about it. What is extinction? Extinction is not reinforcing behavior that's been previously reinforced. So you do this for maladaptive behaviors or behaviors that are not appropriate. Okay? So, let's say a kid wants a cookie, right? And he's been used to asking for the cookie by banging on the table and screaming, ah! And then mom's like, okay, the only thing that calms him down is to give him a cookie. That just like calms him down. He stops this behavior. Okay, it's worked in the past. It's been functional. He knows that if he screams and he's banging his hands on the table, he's gonna get that cookie. And then mom has learned that by giving the cookie, he calms down. Okay, it's working. But is that really how you want the kid to ask for a cookie? Probably not, right? So then you do extinction. So you realize that you cannot give reinforcement when the kid is banging on the table or doing a tantrum or hitting the table or screaming or anything like that. Okay? You want replacement behavior. So you want...
Okay. Once again, why is the child doing that? You don't know. All we know is that the kid's banging and it's their hands on the table or whatever. We don't know for sure everything else that's going on. Now, if that's just something that's happening, that's the behavior that the parents have allowed. But the thing is if that's a behavior issue. However, we're not talking about that. They're making every autistic action a negative behavior is what they're doing, and then trying to change that to make it look like neurotypical people. They don't even know what's wrong, and they never don't even ask the kid. And he hasn't mentioned once. Well, he did mention once in a video at the very beginning about asking a kid once. And we're almost done with the series.
Them to say cookie if they want the cookie, or use sign language to ask for a cookie. Okay? So, here's the thing. When you implement extinction, parents freak out a little bit because the behavior always gets worse. It always gets worse. But then it gets better. You have to trust in the system. There's even a name for it. It's called extinction burst. So basically what happens is you say, okay, from today forward, Johnny has to say cookie to get a cookie. We're not going to accept banging on the table and screaming anymore. So, today comes along. Johnny sits at the table, starts screaming, banging on the table. Mom is there. She wants to give the cookie just to calm him down. You want to give the cookie because you feel bad. But we already decided we're going to use extinction. The kid, he realizes it's not working. Why isn't this working? Bangs harder on the table, screams louder. It's not working. Okay, he's going to take it to the next level. He's going to start throwing things. Now people are like, whoa, is ABA even working? Like, this kid's getting worse. But you're persistent, because ABA therapy...
This is just called parenting. Okay? You don't deal with certain bullshit. That's all there is to it. But I don't need a damn ABA therapist to tell me how to be a parent.
Therapists are super persistent.
Or to parent for me.
And then, guess what? The kid tries saying cookie, or you prompt the word cookie, and he says cookie. And then you give him 10 cookies. Whoa! Now, shouldn't use cookies because we want to avoid diabetes, but you get the hint. Like, the kid is learning that all he has to say is cookie instead of using all his energy to bang on a table, throw things around, and he'll start saying cookie instead of using this other behavior. It eventually clicks, but until then, it starts getting worse. You might see aggression, you might see biting, you might see all kinds of weird behaviors you've never seen before. That's expected. It's called an extinction burst. Now, you keep doing this for a while. Johnny's asking for a cookie by saying cookie, which everything's going great. And then, he's not tantruming or, screaming anymore. Then, let's say 1 month down the road, randomly, he starts hitting the table and screaming for a cookie. What? Why is he doing that? Do we reinforce? No. Okay? This is called a spontaneous recovery. It sometimes happens. Sometimes they got used to that old habit and they try it 1 or 2 more times just to see if it works, see if it's still functional. But it doesn't because you're consistent, and then it goes away for good. And that's extinction. D6. Implement crises/emergency procedures according to protocol. Okay, so some kids or some learners that you work with are a little aggressive and they use physical violence to get their way or to communicate. Okay, and you don't want to get hurt and you don't want the learner to get hurt, so we have to put in some protocols to try to avoid that from happening. We want everyone to be safe. So this exam just wants you to know that you have to take steps to avoid harm to yourself and the learner. So what kind of preventative steps can you take? So let's say if they're gonna try to pull your hair, you have long hair, okay? Tie your hair up, stand up tall so that they can't reach it, keep a safe distance. Those are all things you could do. Let's say you know that your learner likes to bite people, okay? Then you want to make sure you wear like thick clothing so the bites can't get through. Or if it's a severe case, you might have to wear some padding or arm guards to avoid getting hurt. And of course, just try to keep a safe distance. If they're known to throw objects, then make sure the objects aren't there. Or if there have to be objects, make sure there are no objects.
Take the kid's helmet. If they're throwing stuff, take the kid's helmet.
That would cause a lot of
And put it on yourself. I'm sorry, I was the original helmet kid before they had helmets because I had seizures and I would fall on my face all the time. I've still got a scar here. You can probably see it because I could even see my skull. At least once I saw my skull, probably more than once.
harm. Don't have a kitchen knife right there next to the learning area. If you're teaching them, kind of sit really close to them so they can't hurl something at you. You're right there to like block it if they're trying to catch something to throw at you, or sit behind them and teach them from behind. All things you can do. If they try to punch you, just block. Don't give attention to it. Don't look at them. Just kind of block it and go away. Don't grab them. Don't fight back. That's not what you want to do. You just want to block what they're doing. Don't give attention to it. Don't reinforce it. And step back. Now sometimes some individuals, they engage in self-injurious behaviors. They bite themselves, they bang their head against the wall or against the floor, and that's hard to see. And you want to make sure that they're not hurting themselves. So in those cases,
causing a lot of that.
who cares about ABA? You want them to be safe, okay?
What? We are. These have all been about 20 minutes each. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 out of 8. At the very end of this, for the first time, he mentions that we want the autistic child to be safe. This is the first time he has ever mentioned any concern whatsoever for the autistic person. It's actually the first time he's actually acknowledged the autistic person as a human being in need of safety instead of a thing that needs to be taught.
You got to make sure to try to prevent things. So let's say it's a headbanger, right? You want to put a helmet on them.
No, you get them quiet, riot, and you make it play it really loud.
Or block them with your hand. Try not to reinforce the tension too much, but the priority is for them not to hurt themselves. And the final, last resort, we only use this if they're really a danger to themselves, is restraints. And as soon as they don't need the restraints anymore, take them off, okay? We don't like restraints, but if it's necessary...
No. Nope. I'm really surprised he said that. I'm very disappointed that he said that.
Hello and welcome to ABA Made Easy. I'm Mauricio, and today, E1, effectively communicate with your supervisor
So this one is on exam review.
in an ongoing manner. So, all the sessions that are run ultimately are under the responsibility of your supervisor. So, your supervisor can be a BCBA, which is a board certified behavior analyst, or a BCABA, which is a board certified assistant behavior analyst. Since they are responsible, if something goes wrong, they are liable. That's why it's so important to maintain communication with your supervisor. So, how often should you be communicating with your supervisor? Well, you should be meeting at least 2 times a month. And per BACB guidelines, 5% of the hours of ABA therapy that you provide have to be supervised by a supervisor. This is to make sure that the sessions are running correctly. And this is just the minimum requirement, but if anything important happens between the supervision sessions, you must communicate that to the supervisor. This can include any type of change in the learner's behavior. That includes progress, or if they're backtracking on some of the behavior, or if a new problem behavior arises. It also includes any concerns that are noted, and if any incidences happen, like we spoke.
Procedural. This is all procedural. And now this is the problem with ABA is its approach. And as you can see here, they are worried about the technician here. We're learning how to be a technician, and we're learning how to disregard the thoughts, feelings, emotions, the humanity of an ABA of the autistic person. We're teaching to disregard humanity here by completely ignoring the autistic person in this scenario.
Spoke about last video. Another important thing to report is if there's any environmental change, like medication changes, new changes in the family routine, or any other stressors that can come up and interfere with therapy. So here's a few tips when talking to your supervisor. You should always keep it about the client that you're working with, all right? And you want to respect the client at all times. You also want to keep the talk professional. Another good tip if you want to shine as an RBT.
I am really surprised you mentioned the patient once again. Being respectful towards the patient, that's amazing.
Is suggesting ideas based on ABA evidence-based principles that can
evidence-based, but I so love that. And the Spanish Inquisition worked on evidence-based behavioral science when they tortured the Crusaders to get confessions out of them, and then they unlifed them. Yeah, they use behavioral science too, and evidence-based therapies on those Crusaders.
Help the therapy along.
But ultimately, the Knights Templars.
Ultimately, it's up to the supervisor's discretion on which ideas are taken in and which ones they suggest. And since they are liable for the therapy, whatever they choose as the behavior plan is what you're supposed to follow. If you have a really good supervisor, they'll provide feedback on what you're doing right and things that you can improve. And if a supervisor is taking the time out to give you feedback, it's because they care about your skills as a registered behavior technician and the client's progress. So don't take it personal. We could all improve. So take these tips, be thankful that you have a supervisor that actually cares, and just improve with their tips. It's awesome to be able to learn from someone who's been. E2, actively seek clinical direction from a supervisor in a timely manner. So if you're unsure how to run any part of the session because the behavior plans. E3, report other variables that might affect the client in a timely manner. So for those of you that don't, E4, generate objective session notes for service verification by describing what occurred during the sessions in accordance with applicable legal, regulatory, and workplace requirements. Dude, these titles are too long. So documentation of what you do is important. Legally, if you don't document it, it was never done. All right, last section of E. E5. Comply with applicable legal, regulatory, and workplace data collection, storage, transportation, and documentation requirements. So as a healthcare Hello and welcome to ABA Made Easy. I'm Mauricio, and today we'll be covering the
He's using different equipment this time. Same place, just different equipment.
Final part of the exam. F. Professional conduct and scope of practice. You've made it to the final video. And guess what? I have a reinforcer saved for the end of this video that I think you'd appreciate. But if you're finding these useful at all, hit like down below, subscribe if you haven't done so already, and let other people know that are studying for the RBT exam about these videos if you found them useful. Might help them too. But let's get into it. So my notes are up there this time, so if I look up there, don't think I'm just gazing out into space. I pay attention, I make eye contact, okay? F1. Describe the BACB's RBT supervision requirements and the role of RBTs in the service delivery system. Alright, so what do you need to know about your hours and supervision? That you are in charge of keeping track of these hours, and you're the one in charge of making sure you get supervised in a timely manner. So what does that mean? It means you have to track the hours you work, and track the hours you get supervised, and if you need to get supervised, it's your responsibility to make sure your supervisor does supervise you. Now, if it's a good supervisor, they'll just automatically come to your sessions when they should, but you know, everyone's human.
I'm going to take a quick break, and I'm going to find some more material to look at. So I will be right back.
Hello and welcome.
Okay, so today I'm going to go through the entire task. Okay. So today I'm going to go through the entire task list for your RBT exam. This will be a longer video. I've got the study guide on the screen so you can follow along. Feel free to jump around to individual pieces or just follow through with the whole thing. So I'm going to go step by step, try to go as slow as possible, and try to hit
I'm not
everything that could be on your test. All right.
This
So
exam because it's not going to be very learny. I'm going to take a quick gander at this and see what this
together
is.
And breaking them down. If you're new to the channel, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. Please like and subscribe. Check out btexamreview.com for all of our study materials, including our combo pack. When you pass the exam, let us know so we can include you in the Sunday shout out. Work hard, study hard. Let's get going. Sam frequently taps his pencil on the desk during class. His teacher normally will tell him to stop, but data show that Sam's behavior is not changing despite the reprimands. This week, the teacher hasn't told Sam anything, and the behavior has started to decrease. What is the likely function based on this information? So we have a function question. And remember, functions explain why behavior occurs. What is the effect on the environment? Functions also help explain what is reinforcing or maintaining the behavior. Now, what do we know so far about Sam's behavior? Because we want to identify why that behavior is occurring. We know he taps his pencil during class. We know the teacher normally reprimands him by telling him to stop, but it has no.
So we're not going to take into consideration the fact that he taps his pencil during the class because he's stimming, and he needs that for emotional regulation and nervous regulation. So he taps his pencil on the desk during class. His teacher will normally tell him to stop. The data show that Sam's behavior is not changing. This week, the teacher has not told Sam anything, and the behavior is starting to decrease. What is the function? What is the function of this behavior? It's attention, because he's trying to. That's what they're going to say. He's trying to get attention. And he's not getting the attention, so the behavior's decreasing, is what they're going to say.
Effect on Sam's behavior. So, meaning, Sam is continuing to tap his pencil.
He might have found a better stem. He might be chewing gum.
Despite being told to stop. So, even though it's
but we automatically do not assume that this child is being a jerk on purpose. Just because they can.
Explanation says the behavior isn't changing. It's safe to assume that the reprimands are at least maintaining Sam's behavior. And why can we assume that? Well, because this week the teacher didn't tell Sam anything and the behavior started to decrease. In other words, Sam would tap his pencil, Sam would get reprimanded, Sam kept tapping his pencil. If Sam tapped his pencil and the teacher didn't say anything, Sam would stop tapping his pencil. So why do we think Sam's behavior is occurring? A, to obtain a tangible. Is Sam trying to get some sort of object or item or stimulus? No. What he's doing is he's tapping his pencil so that the teacher will tell him something. How do we know that? Again, when the teacher tells him to stop, the behavior continues. If teacher says nothing.
And see, the thing is they are behavioralizing autism. He may have been chewing gum. He may have had something that happened to him at home that caused that behavior. And now it's not happening and he's mellowing out. It could be he's just being a jerk. But if that's the case, that's the case. But do not behavioralize a stimming. And what they're doing is they're behavioralizing stimming here. They're trying to find an excuse. And they will make up an excuse and they will change that behavior. Don't get me wrong. They will make him stop tapping his pencil, but they will not help the child. They will help the teacher not be annoyed because he's tapping his damn pencil.
The behavior doesn't continue and starts to decrease. Do we think Sam is trying to escape? Well, nowhere in this explanation does it look like he's trying to escape. It looks like he's working for attention. In other words, he's engaging in his pencil tapping behavior to get the teacher to say something to him and give him some of that attention. And it isn't automatic because this is socially mediated. If a behavior has an automatic function, it means there's not another person involved. It's automatic, sometimes called sensory.
And that's exactly what stimming is, sensory. Tapping the pencil on a desk is sensory. That's the reason he's doing it. Everything else after that is something else. So, let's look at it a different way. Sam frequently taps his pencil on the desk during class due to his need to stim. So the teacher gives him gum. Next question. It's just that easy. Instead of behavioralizing it and going through all this crap and accusing the child of attention-getting behaviors, why don't you just help the kid? This is what the problem with ABA is.
In this case, based on this information, it appears Sam's behavior is happening for attention. When you plan date night with your partner, you always check first how many stars a restaurant has based on reviews.
When you plan date night with your partner, you always check first to see how many stars a restaurant has based on reviews. If it has less than 4, you do not go to the restaurant. A rating of 4 stars is likely a relative. What kind of type of reinforcement? Relative to not going to the restaurant. I forget what these.
If the restaurant has less than 4 stars, you do not go to that restaurant. A rating of less than 4 stars is likely a blank relative to not going to the restaurant. All right, so let's think about this. We have a behavior question, and we have a question asking about something relative to something else. So we're looking at the effect of the 4 stars or less than 4 stars on not going to a restaurant. So let's first identify, is less than 4 stars an antecedent or a consequence? What's an antecedent? When you have less than 4 stars, it evokes a behavior of avoidance. We don't go to the restaurant. So this is clearly an antecedent of not going to the restaurant, meaning we can rule out consequences. Now, is this a motivating operation or a discriminative stimulus? Well, it's going to act as an SD in this case because it's signaling to you.
It's definitely a motivating operation, but it might fall under reinforcement.
That if you avoid the restaurant with less than 4 stars,
it could be considered reinforcement if it consistently happens. And
you're going to get a consequence of avoiding the bad restaurant. So you're avoiding or escaping the bad restaurant. You're probably going to be negatively reinforced because you've avoided going to a bad restaurant by not going to a restaurant of less than 4 stars. So the rating of less than 4 stars is the SD to avoid going to the restaurant. It's the SD for engaging in avoidance when you do not go to a restaurant of less than 4 stars. It doesn't necessarily increase or decrease the value of something based on satiation or deprivation. It's simply signaling to you that there is reinforcement to be had for not going to the bad restaurant. So the rating of less than 4 stars is likely a SD relative to not going to the restaurant.
Okay.
Kyle rarely eats dessert anymore, but when he does, he typically eats enough to make himself feel sick. He gets so excited to eat the dessert that he just can't help himself after not having any dessert for so long. What happens that increases the value of the dessert?
Deprivation.
If you start getting questions about value increasing or decreasing, you want to start thinking motivating operations. Motivating operations increase or decrease the value of stimuli, the value of consequences. And typically that happens through deprivation or satiation. Now, when we talk about deprivation, what are we talking about? When you are deprived of something, that means you're not getting enough of something. And when you're deprived of something, that thing you're deprived of becomes more valuable. When you're satiated on something, you're getting too much of something. And whatever you're satiated on becomes less valuable. So if it becomes more valuable. So when he gets examples,
all right, here we go.
Are they using? The therapist records whether hand flapping occurred at the end of each 5-minute interval until the 30 minutes are up. What type of measure?
Let's go to the beginning of this one.
A behavior technician wants to measure how often a child engages in hand flapping behavior during a 30-minute observation period. The therapist records whether hand flapping occurred at the end of each 5-minute interval until the 30 minutes are up. What type of measurement are they using? So we have a measurement question. And when you have a measurement question, ask yourself first, are we continuously measuring or are we discontinuously measuring? Are we using a full sample or are we using interval recordings? Well, in this case, we're using 30-minute observation periods and breaking them down into intervals. So we obviously have some sort of interval recording. If we have interval recording, we have discontinuous measurement. We can eliminate our continuous measurement examples. Now, in this case, when you have interval recording, you have to identify when is data collected. When does a response count? For this therapist, they are recording at the end of each interval. So if we're taking data, not during the interval, but at the end of each interval, what type of measurement are we using? A, whole interval recording. Now, with whole interval recording, if we have 5-minute intervals, that behavior has to happen that whole 5 minutes. That's what we mean by whole interval recording. If we have B, partial interval recording, then that behavior only has to happen for a piece of the interval. 1 second is enough for partial interval recording. What we're doing here, though, if we're looking at the end of each 5-minute interval, we're looking at momentary time sampling. With momentary time sampling, we're looking at the very end of each interval. If the behavior is occurring at the end, we count it. If it's not occurring, we don't count it. So we're looking at momentary time sampling in this example. And then frequency recording is obviously taking account continuous. We can eliminate that. If the therapist is looking at the end of each 5-minute interval, each time the interval until the 30 minutes are up, they are using momentary time sampling. You're teaching a child to brush their teeth. Initially, you provide physical guidance to help them hold the tooth.
It's amazing how there is just zero concern for the kids. It's just so regimented.
Brush their teeth. Over time, you gradually reduce to physical assistance until the child can complete the task independently. What prompting technique are you using? All right.
See, you're teaching a child to brush your teeth. Initially, you provide full physical guidance. Oh my God, hands-on. To help them hold the toothbrush and brush their teeth. Over time, you gradually reduce physical assistance. I don't know what this is called.
Right, so we have a prompting question. Remember, prompts can go in hierarchies, and we have different strategies for prompting. In this case, we're teaching teeth brushing, and we are providing full physical guidance to hold the toothbrush and brush the teeth. So this looks like some full physical prompting to begin. But over time, what are you doing? Well, you're reducing physical assistance gradually. Now be very careful here, okay? This says gradually reduce, and you have this option of graduated guidance. Graduated guidance is much quicker than this. Graduated guidance says you're only using as much physical prompting as necessary and then immediately fading it out. In this example, you're starting with full physical and gradually fading out the prompting until it's no longer needed. So what are we using here? Are we using most to least to most, or errorless? If we're using errorless, it's going to specify we're preventing all mistakes. In this case, we don't have that specification, and it shows we are going from that physical guidance to no physical assistance. So what we're doing is we're going from the most intrusive prompt to a less intrusive prompt. The type of prompting we're going to be using is
okay. This is a channel I'm going to definitely go back to. See what this lady has to say.
Hello and welcome back to my channel. For those of you that are new here, my name is Anna Turi and I am a once certified RBT that is now assisting others enter the field of ABA the right way. If you are here because you
There is no right to ABA.
are looking for tips and tricks to study and pass your RBT exam, don't go far, we're gonna get right into it. Real quick, if you are not following me on Instagram, please be sure to do so, ABA_source. We learn a lot on there. We talk a lot. We get together as a community. So if you're interested in the field and you're just coming in, that is a really, really good place to start. So go ahead and follow me and I'll see you there. So the first resource that I recommend you use to study for your upcoming RBT board exam is your 40-hour training. I know, it's probably not something you wanted to hear, but it is so important that you take your 40-hour training seriously. Your 40-hour training, although super insanely long and maybe not the most
40 hours, and for the rest of their life, they are considered to be experts. Think about that. 17-year-old kid could take a 40-hour course and they are an expert for life in ABA.
exciting part of our journey. It is definitely the foundation of everything that's going to be on the RBT board exam. That being said, be sure to write down any areas that you did not really understand and go back and review those areas when you're finished. If by the time you review them and you still don't understand, it's definitely going to be the time for you to take that to your trainer and ask them, because you do want to know everything that is in the 40-hour training, because you will most likely see it again in your board exam. Okay, the second resource I have that you may utilize to study for your upcoming RBT board exam is RBT Jeopardy. It's actually a free resource. I will leave the link in the description box. And it's just a fun way to get your, get your head out of the books or out of reading paragraphs on paragraphs and doing the hardcore studying, and just a fun way to review everything. You can also have teams while playing Jeopardy. So if you're going through the journey with somebody else or a few other people, you guys can make groups together and have a Jeopardy winner. The next thing I recommend you do is find yourself a really good RBT study guide. Now, why do I recommend this? Well, the 40-hour training is 40 hours of content, 40 hours of ABA content. So if you think back to college or high school,
Okay, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to give what I think are the 4 best tips to pass the RBT exam. This is based on the many years I've been doing this.
I need some coffee before we start. Nothing better than cold coffee. Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Caridad and I'm a registered behavior technician. So in today's video, I'm going to be sharing with you tips and tricks on how to pass your RBT board exam. I think these tips can really help you out, and these resources is what helped me. I'm Caridad and I'm a registered behavior technician. Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Caridad and I'm a registered behavior technician. So in today's video, I'm going to be sharing with you tips and tricks on how to pass your RBT board exam. I think these tips can really help you out, and these resources is what helped me and made me feel confident going into my RBT exam and passing it the first time. So if that's something you're interested in, keep on watching. Okay, my first tip is for those of you that still have not started the RBT 40-hour certification course and you're just, looking ahead. This is for you. Research your 40-hour certification course and make sure it's approved by the board, because you want to make sure you have the most accurate information and apply to take the RBT exam that they're going to approve. This
This
course
is so crazy because like there's nothing I can find that is like totally centered on the autistic person. Nothing I can find yet that is focused on them.
is also the basis of where you're going to get most of your information to study for the board. So you want to make sure, you have accurate information based on what's going to be on the exam, as well as taking notes and all of that, because that's going to be the bulk of your resources when you are studying. So that's just a little, before we get into it. For those of you that still haven't started the 40-hour certification, I really highly recommend you really research into that, because you do want a good foundation to be able to pass your RBT board exam. So now my first official tip. So the first thing I would recommend,
not gonna be anything about the autistic person, guarantee you,
is to look at certain blogs, and I'm gonna be sharing with you some of those blogs now. But I like these blogs because they have flashcards and videos and really in-depth explanation on some specific like interventions and things you have to know for the exam. So my favorite blog, and this is the one I personally used to study when I was taking the board exam, is called ABA Rocks. It's completely free. You have access to a bunch of quizzes, flashcards, and other resources that I find really helped me study and pass for my test. The second blog that I recently found out about, and I shared it with someone who asked me for advice, and they said that it really helped them, so I would definitely check it out if you're interested in that. It's called Behavior Babe. I'm going to put it up here. I thought it was super cool, and it had a bunch of information like videos and on specific sections and things like that I think will really help you if maybe you're struggling on a specific part, or maybe you're not understanding discrete trial trainings very good, different things that might be on the exam. So that's a great way to, once you know exactly what you need to work on, you can focus on that and use free resources like this to help you practice. Okay, so my third tip is to take practice exams and quizzes and time yourself. Okay. So the exam is...
Enough of that. I will be
Okay, welcome back.
I will be back. I'm going to take a break now, and I will be back in, I believe, in a couple hours, and I will get back to the RBT actual exams and so forth, and we'll look at the trainings and so forth, and see if I can find some trainings. And we'll actually look at the trainings. I have been absolutely astounded at what I have found in these trainings so far. This is David Page. Screw them, flap harder.